open this up. Well, good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing?
Very good.
All right, very good. I tell you what, I just love your pastors. I do. Pastor David and Danielle, they are just some of the sweetest and kindest people on the planet. And I know you know that. That's why part of the reason why you're here. But you see something that is uniquely different here in this house. And man, if you are new as a guest, you're not getting the best side of Good Soil today because I'm here. I'm a fill-in for really a wonderful pastor, and so I get to be a friend of the house. And so thank you for inviting me back and not inviting me, because that's always weird, right? And so, but it is good. And if you came in after the fact, you don't know who I am. My name is Chad. I get the privilege of in this season kind of doing a lot of really cool things. I get to pastor pastors around the country, from Las Vegas to Pennsylvania, to New Orleans, to Jacksonville, to Margate, and I kind of just love on pastors in this season, and it is really fun to do. And I don't have any responsibility in the church outside of just loving on people and making sure that pastors are healthy, because it's important that they're healthy, and it's important that their families are good. It's important that husband and wife and your pastor, your leadership don't hate each other and they like each other, and it's important for that to happen. So I get the privilege of doing that. I also get the privilege of being the COO for 2 companies here in Palm Beach. Actually, both run from Fort Lauderdale to Fort Pierce. One's a private security company, and we get the privilege of taking care of really fun clientele. Then the other side of that is a valet company. That's one of the long-standing valet companies here in West Palm Beach. 34 years running, so I get the privilege of doing that, and I get to be a dad and husband to a really awesome family. So my wife's here, she's here today, my wife Kristen, and she will never be up here, and so that's just who she is. Her gift sets are much different, and I will talk to a wall as long as it stands still, and she's good one-on-one, so feel free after the fact. It'll be good. Well, hey, I wanted to kind of just recap. If you were here with us last time, or here with me last time I spoke, I kind of left you on a cliffhanger. I talked about my story a little bit, and I talked to you about this moment that I was driving my car up over this hill and about to cross over Grandview Avenue. And are my folks from Pittsburgh here today by chance? The family? No? Yeah? Okay, so there was a couple here. They're like, I know where that is. I'm from there, so it was fun. But I talked about this little girl, and that she was standing right in the middle of this overlook, and I was about to do something that was going to hurt me. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't want to hurt anyone else. And it was this little girl, brown hair, shoulder length, little longer than shoulder length, in a pink dress. And when I got out of the car, that little girl wasn't there anymore. And I asked where that little girl was. People that were around said, man, there was no one here. And the one guy actually said, I've been here for the last hour. I've not seen a little girl there, man. I'm really, really sorry. And so in that moment, I sobered up very quickly. And it was the first time that I prayed, if you remember the story. What I didn't tell you is what the Lord was revealing to me in that moment. And what the Lord was revealing to me in that moment was this beautiful little girl. And as you see her in a little pink dress and her hair just a little bit longer, the Lord was revealing to me the dad that I was going to become, to a beautiful little girl. And so make no mistake in your life that what the Lord will show you 20 years in advance of something He wants to prepare you for. God is saving you, God has saved you, and God is doing something uniquely special. This is her now. She's actually about to be a high school student, but most people are like, I'm about to be a high school student, pray for me. She is the nicest, kindest, sweetest, most gentle young lady on the planet. She loves Jesus, wants to honor God with her dance, and she is just absolutely tremendous. She looks like her mom, thank God, because that would be awkward. But she is as kind today as she was when she was little. And man, God is faithful. God took me in a moment of destruction and showed me my future. You have a future. You have a purpose. I know you know that. And I'm so grateful that you're here today. But I wanted to just kind of cap that off because I knew that I left you on a cliffhanger. And I didn't do it intentionally. I just forgot to finish the story. And so I wanted to start off today with that. Because it then brings me in. I'm going to continue to bring you into my story a little bit. We're actually going to be reading today out of Matthew 22. But before we even get there, I kind of want to have you just continuing with me in my story. When I gave my life to Christ, not just a few years after that night, Because it took me a little bit. I'm stubborn. Okay, I don't know if anyone else in here is stubborn, but I'm a little stubborn. But when I gave my life to Christ, guys, I was hanging on for dear life. I mean, it wasn't like I came to Jesus and I was like, woohoo! I was really good at sinning. Like, I did it really well. And so there were aspects of my life that I was still struggling with. And right after 9/11, I was at another church. And that church was hosting an emergency services kind of service right after 9/11. And I was sitting in the front row. I think I was even by myself. I don't remember. I think there might have been, my dad might have been with me, but I was sitting in the front row, and I was active from like day one in church. So I didn't know the rules of church. So I'm like, cool, I'm going to speak, I'm going to say stuff, I'm going to comment in the middle of something. I was like, I'm all in. Like, I'm just all in. I loved it. And so the pastor said something that I liked, and I remember going, hey, Matt, or something like that. I don't remember. Kids are having fun. They're good. But I was in service, and this guy behind me puts his massive hand on my shoulder. And I was like, I guess you don't talk in church. Like, I thought that's what I was talking. And he leans in, and I didn't want to turn around because of the size of the hand I could feel on my shoulder. And as you can tell, I'm not the biggest man on the planet. And he goes, are you a cop? And I was like, I'm not. I'm actually what every cop wants to be. I'm a firefighter. And I thought that was a good joke. His grip got tighter on my shoulder. And so I was like, no, that's not good. So I turned around, and he looks at me. And he goes, Chad Lang? I said, Joe LaMonica? He gets up with tears in his eyes. He wraps his big old arms around me. And he gives me a hug, and he whispers in my ear. He said, Chad, have you given your life to Christ? That's going to mean a lot here in just a second. Because, see, Joe is this gentleman right here. And this picture does not do him justice. He is actually a narcotics detective in Ross Township, and that was an area that I frequented often prior to giving my life to Christ. And see, Joe had actually given me bracelets 3 different times prior to giving my life to Christ. It was really nice gifts. They didn't last long. But see, Joe actually gave me those. And so that was our relationship. That's what we knew. What I love about that story is Joe, with tears in his eyes, right in the middle of the service, he said, Chad, I actually have a group of guys that are getting together at my house on Friday for breakfast, and I would love for you to join us. Would you do that? I said, Joe, I would love to do that. Now, that was a long time ago, okay? So, to give you context, it was back in 2000, right? So, I went over to this breakfast. See, what I didn't know is Joe was actually... Joe was inviting me to a small group. He was inviting me to a group of guys that have already been getting together for probably a few years at that point. And he just said, brother, I get it. And I told him in that conversation, I said, Joe, I'm barely hanging on to this faith thing. I just don't know what to do. And he said, I understand, man. You just need to get some people around you. And that's me inviting me to breakfast. And I said, Joe, that'd be great. So I went over to his house for breakfast. And there were a good group of people, right? It was a little bit of a misfit bunch. You got Joe, who's very pastoral, but never once spent a day in ministry full-time. We had a guy named Bart, who Bart just was like a walking Strong's Concordance. Like, I swear he knew every verse of every Bible and every translation that you could ever talk. And then he knew it in Hebrew. And I'm like, Bart, I don't even understand you, right? But he was such a wonderful man, the kindest man. And then there was Mike, and Mike was such a good dad. And he was such a good husband. And then there was a guy named Steve. And Steve, this group in Jesus kind of messed with his nightlife. You know what I mean? Like, it was good. And then there was me. And I was the youngest by probably close to 15 years. But Joe didn't stop there for me. He didn't say no. You know, have you ever thought about I should ask somebody to do something that you automatically say no for them? Have you ever done that? It doesn't matter what it is, right? But you say no for them. Joe didn't say no for me. He didn't tell me, hey, by the way, you're going to be the youngest there. It's going to be a little awkward. It's all good. He didn't say any of that. He just said, hey, would you join me for breakfast? Now, here's the cool thing. It's now been over 20 years, and I am still connected to this man. He calls me. He reaches out to me. He prays for me. He learns from me. Now in this season, I learn from him continuously still. 20 years of doing ministry alongside this guy. This is my small group leader. Joe LaMonica lives in Pittsburgh. He just retired from the department. And we called and he talked to me about it before he did it. And so he's just been my leader. He's been my pastor for quite a long time. And a little while ago, actually last October, I remember Hurricane Ian came through. And Hurricane Ian really just devastated the west coast of Florida, right? And some of you remember this, and all of us remember it. But I actually got dispatched and deployed as the first pastor in the state of Florida to be deployed as alongside of a task force in the state of Florida to a natural disaster, which is kind of it's just an honor to have the ability to do that. And I did that as a fire chaplain and a pastor of Palm Beach Charge Fire Rescue. But I actually wasn't even deployed with my team. I was just deployed with task force. And so this was our crew that I had the privilege of being alongside of on Fort Myers Beach. And just to give you a little bit, because if you looked at images, they kind of didn't really do it justice. I had to get my bearings when I got on the site. I needed to wrap my mind around what I was about to see. And kind of giving you some context here. The destruction was just overwhelming. And what I don't have in these photos, just multiple churches is completely devastated over there. What I don't have in these photos is what I saw on the streets. It was a lot. It was overwhelming. I've been doing emergency services off and on for over 20 years. 23 years, as a matter of fact. But I was not prepared for what I saw. Not even close. And in that moment, I had a satellite phone because normal cell phones didn't work, and I wanted to call somebody. And I used that satellite phone. And did I call my wife? No. Sorry. No, I didn't. Did I call my pastor? No, I didn't call my pastor. Did I call my dad or my brother? I didn't. You know who I called? I called Joe. I called my small group leader. And I called him and I said, Joe, I don't know if I can do this. I've dealt with a lot. And I sat on where the pier used to be at Fort Myers Beach. How many of you have been to Fort Myers before? Right? Okay, you've been over there. I stood where the pier used to be. And I was weeping. I said, Joe, I don't know if I can do this. This is hard. My first day there. And Joe said, Chad, cried with me on the phone. He said, you wouldn't be there if God didn't want you there. He said, can I pray over you? You are the man of God that they need on that island. Those people in task force 2 need you there. And he just prayed for me. Prayed for God's peace, His mercy, His guidance, His wisdom, His word to come forth from you. And I had the privilege of being there for 3 days, almost 4, to kind of set the groundwork for the teams that were coming in afterwards. I called my small group leader. As I was the youngest in that group, about 12 to 15 years. It didn't matter. See, Joe was right when he initially had that conversation with me. He said, I needed to get some people around me. What he was really saying is I needed to get some people in my life who loved me and only wanted God's best for me. Some people that weren't trying to change me, but got me to a spot where I was open enough, where Jesus could do the work in me that I didn't know I needed. And by the way, still need. No matter how long you've been walking with Jesus, there's still more work to be done. Some of you that own homes, you realize that you've been in your home for 20 years and you're looking, and there's always work to be done. Right? Until the day of completion, until God calls us home, there's always going to be work to be done in us. And I was preparing for today, and that statement rang through my head over and over and over again. So out of that, here's my question for us as we dive into today's message out of Matthew 22. My friend, who are your people? Who are your people? Just I need to get some people in my life. I didn't even know what he meant. I was a young kid trying to hang on, not trying to ruin my life at that point. Right? You may not be there, I understand that, right? You're more refined than me. I understand that, right? But can I tell you that even in my life now, pastoring over 20 years now, I still need those folks in my life. I still need Joe in my life in the moments that are hard. I'm sent over, deployed. I'm so honored to be on this ground in a moment. And my God, I needed my small group leader. I needed this guy who would be willing to reach down into me and tell me that I'm called according to God's purpose to do his work on the earth. And I'm like, God, I don't get it. But before we get into today's message, and we're going to be out of Matthew 22. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there. If not, it's going to be on the screen. But there were these religious leaders in the Bible, and these individuals always try to, like during Jesus' 3-year ministry time, always try to catch him in like something. They always try to get him where they could put him to death, stone him, find him lying, just find flaws in him. That's just who they were. They weren't nice. They acted nice, but weren't nice, right? And they were always doing this. And so this was right before that. Jesus, before we get into that moment, these leaders were bucking up against Jesus, and they asked him, what's the most important commandment from the law of Moses? And so the Pharisees, these laws, they're like, I want to get him. I want to get him. I want to get him now. Like Jesus is going to fail, right? And I love Jesus' reply. For those of you with iPhones, 3 little bubbles, right? Jesus' reply. He replied, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. In a second, wait a second, they said, what's the greatest? And he's like, I got 2. And I'm making one up on the fly. This is Jesus. This is who he is. I love Jesus. He just does his own thing. He's kind of he walks on water. He can do it every month, right? So a second is equally as important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law, everything you've ever heard from the prophets, the entire law, and all the demands of the prophets are based on these 2 commandments. Wait a second. Wait a second. If you're newer to this thing called faith, and you're looking to get connected to some people, I want to give you some things to look for here in a minute. I want to reread this real quick. Jesus replied, you must love the Lord your God with all your what? Say it with me. Let's be active. But what is it? Heart, all your soul, and with all your mind. Right. So if you're newer to church, and I know in a few weeks you as a church are about to embark into a small group season and about to get connected, and I'm excited about that. I really firmly believe that I wouldn't be in ministry today if it weren't for my small group. Well, it wasn't for Joe, right? And the small groups that I've had the privilege to lead over years. But if you are new here and you're looking to get some people around you, you're looking for a Joe, here are some things that you should look for. First and foremost, look for someone that has a genuine desire to love God and is passionately pursuing Him. Look for somebody. If you're young in here and you're like, who should I look for, right? Look for some people that just want to be like Jesus. Just look for some people that are passionate about His Word, want to read it, aren't afraid to pray for you, aren't afraid to worship and lift their hands. They're not like, don't you get how me? You know, they're like all in. They're desperately passionate for a God who loves them because they realize that they are broken vessels being healed and mended by a loving and a forever God. Look for some people that are passionate. Not always, by the way, it can't always be your pastors. Now I know as you're a startup church and you're getting things ready, it's very easy to rely on Pastor Dave and Danielle to be like, I'm going to be connected to those guys. And you got to calm down. Like it can't always be them. Joe never stepped foot in ministry. Not a day. And I've been pastored by that guy more than anyone else I've ever been pastored by in all my years of being in church. By the way, Joe never once served a day in ministry as a pastor. Joe just loved God, and even though he gave me bracelets prior, Joe loved God, and it was evident. He wasn't perfect, and he let us know that as well. If you're looking for perfect people, I'm here to tell you, good luck. If you find a perfect person, they won't be here long because Jesus is going to take them straight up to heaven. This is the way it's going to work. It's just people are going to let you down. They're going to hurt you. They're not going to text you when they have a party, and it's not going to be on purpose. They just forgot, right? You're going to hurt. But he struggled, and he reached out when he did, which leads me to my next point. Look for someone that's always real and not someone that's always right. If you remember my last message, I actually had this point in there as well. You'll hear it as a pretty much a reoccurring theme with me. Look for somebody that's real, not somebody that's always wanting to be right. If someone has the right answer at all times, you know what the best thing Joe did with his group? He hosted it. He didn't lead it. He let us be a part of it as an active role. Yes, he planned. Yes, he had questions to ask, but he wasn't assuming the reality of always having the right answer. And a lot of times he'd be like, he'll call me today. And he'd be like, hey, I was thinking about this one thing in the Bible. I'm struggling with it. I just don't like it. Talk to me about it. And I love that. You could just call it. I'm like, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to it. Right? Because if you got someone that's like, I know all the answers in the Bible, run from that person. Right? It's just reality, right? So I'm just helping those that are looking for maybe a Joe in their life. Maybe you're here, you're seeing their life. God bless you. But you know what I loved is Bart was attending Joe's group. Bart was probably 10, 15 years older than Joe. And Bart knew the Bible better than anyone on the planet. I don't think I've ever met somebody that knew the Bible more than Bart in all my years of being a minister. I've never once found someone like Bart. But Bart was never it was such a good way about it. But he still wanted to get close to somebody. He wanted to find a Joe as well. The next thing is look for someone you feel connected to. Look for somebody you have like a common interest to. You know, it's not. Joe and I had a common interest. He was a police officer. I was a firefighter. We had a natural connection. It was not because of our height. That's for sure. Right? You saw the picture of that man. Now, I know it didn't do it justice, but he's a massive. He's just. Trust me, being on the other side of him with putting bracelets on me wasn't fun. You know what I mean? Just the reality of that. But look for someone that you're connected to. Someone that you're like, man, I like you. Like, that's good, right? Joe and I had similar interests. He connected on that level and helped me let down some walls and some things that I needed to kind of open up to, just to have breakfast every Friday for years and years and years, right? An individual that you're connected to, you'll automatically let down some of those walls, those natural barriers that you have in your life, that you're like, oh, we're fine. Right? No one can ever know that my wife and I fight consistently. No one can ever know that I'm in financial strain. No one can ever know that I hate my job. No one can ever know. Whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? Like those were fond moments. I feel like an awful dad sometimes. I do. I don't know about you, but that one's for me. Like sometimes I just feel like an awful dad. Like I do. I feel like I win sometimes, but then I'm like, oh man, I'm messing you up. You know what I'm saying? Like you just need some people that you connect to and someone that you just feel. But here's the reality. If you don't get connected to people that you feel a connection to, you're always going to feel like kind of that odd man out. You ever been invited to something and you're in it and you're going, I shouldn't be here, right? You kind of feel that way sometimes. You ever been to a wedding and you're like, I know no one. I'm at a table with, you can tell that you were placed at that table. That was like the afterthought table. You know what I'm saying? Like during that wedding, you put people there. I know you have, right? And so, but you don't ever want that, right? It feels awful. So make sure that you find someone you're connected to. Second part of this incredible passage is critically important for everyone in here that knows God, loves Him, seeks Him, prays, gives, all the things. And it comes down to being a part of an incredible, thriving startup church. Matter of fact, that passage, and we're going to continue right here. It's the second, is equally as important. He also replied this. A second, equally important. Wait, what? Equally as important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all of its demands of the prophets are based on these two commands. Love your neighbor as yourself. Who are your people? Who are your people? Who's your neighbor? Who are the individuals that you're hitching your wagon to? Who are the individuals speaking into your life? Who are the individuals praying for you? Who are the individuals that you're praying for? By the way, it goes both ways. You know what I'm saying? Like it just doesn't matter the season of life you're in. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It just doesn't matter. It is critically important that you understand what your neighbor, who your neighbor is. And what the reality is, what is Jesus saying here when he, the creator of the universe, creator of people, sand, hair follicles, ice cream, when he talked about your neighbors, what he's really saying is, if you really love me, he desires us to intentionally love others. He desires us to intentionally love other people. Like intentional. Not just like, I tolerate you. Because we have the, I love you. I'm going to love you. I'm going to value you. What Jesus is saying to those of us that love him, I need you to invite someone to breakfast that you detained or arrested 3 times. And do that with such a genuine heart that the past is never brought up. I understand that's my story. Joe never once brought up our interactions. Not once. I did. He never did. He just saw me for someone that was just trying to do right and wanted to help that process along. Never once. Check this out. This loving your neighbor thing, this love others thing really works best when we invest in those we invite over. So if you're a small group leader and you're about to lead a group, really great. You have a responsibility to invest in those who you invite. Invest in them. Don't just like set up group, have your stuff out, do your workout, do your thing, and not invest in them. Text them throughout the week. How are you doing? What's going on? How's everything going? You know, give them a phone call. Care for them. Invest in them. There is a critically important role. Joe, not having to. I have not lived in Pittsburgh since when? 2011? Yeah? I haven't lived in Pittsburgh since 2011. This guy is 2023. This guy still reaches out 23 years later. It's really critical that we invest in those in White Good Soil. In a few weeks, as you guys are going to launch some new groups out of your church, for those of you that are leading those, just hear me thinking about it. I want to encourage you to ask yourself this question. Who are my people? Who is my neighbor? Because some of you are just going to be like, hey, I want to invite people from the church. Right? Just invite them in. It's easy, right? They're right next to you. It is the people in your church. I want you to invite people that are right next to you, that are sitting here worshiping with you, because they need it as well as anything else, right? They need community. They need relationship. They need that neighbor. They need that relationship in their life. That's for sure. But this also means people you work with. Even those that may drive you nuts, right? You got that one employee that, if you know, that it's just the thing, man, what's going on in their life? My son, a few weeks ago, prior to getting out of school, had this young man that was bullying him again. And it's just, my son, look, and the reality is my son is like super small, right? It is a reality of his life, but he's actually like this, he's just a mighty mini, man. Like, he's awesome. He does jiu-jitsu too. He just did, these kids were much taller than him. He made them both tap out in his tournament just a few weeks ago. Like, it's awesome. He just got this confidence and strength, and it's amazing. But when it comes down to this kid in school, he just didn't have this confidence. And this kid was like pushing him over and doing all kinds of stuff to him. And Jude and I had this conversation. I said, man, what's going on with this kid's life? Like, what's going on at home? Right? So you never know the individual that sits next to you in the cubicle, the individual that's in the nursing units next to you. Whatever it is, what they got going on in their life, even if they drive you nuts, there's probably a good reason they do. Those that live next door to you, literally your neighbor, right? People are like, who's my neighbor? I don't know. They look everywhere else but except right next door, right? Right across the street. You see your neighbor. I got these neighbors right across the street. I'm not even sure if they're spies or not. I'm not sure. We're trying to figure it out. But they don't talk to anyone. They'll like look at us like as their garage door's coming down, and they're like, you know, and it's kind of bizarre. But I'm like, man, I got to get connected. I don't know who they are. I don't know their names. If the police ever come looking, I need to know. No, I'm just joking. Like, but you just got to invite them in and be a part of finding out who your people are. Joe didn't care that I was young. He also, again, I said this earlier, he didn't say no from me. He just opened the door for an invite. And since that group, I have led groups nonstop ever since. It impacted my life so much. in my spiritual walk. But every time I hosted or led one, I personally invited people to join it on whatever we were doing. I never wanted people to feel like they had to like, can I go? Am I? Man, I'm just gonna invite you. I'll invite anyone. We were sitting at Dunkin' Donuts right over here on Wellington Trace and Greenview Shores. We were over here at that Dunkin' Donuts, and then we were at another Starbucks over here, and then we had another Starbucks because that Starbucks kicked us out, and that Dunkin' Donuts actually. Because at one point we were putting every table in the place together because we just invited people. Our groups, and how that invite went was a little bit different. It wasn't going, hey, you want to come to my small group? I'd love for you to join us. We're going to be meeting for 6 weeks. No, man. Hey, there's a group of guys that are getting connected, married guys. They're getting connected on Wednesday night at 7:30 for coffee. Man, if you want to come, I'd love for you to be there. We'd be halfway in the middle of a study, but I'd act like it's the first night we're meeting. Why? Because I never want someone to feel like they're the odd man out, right? I've led workout groups, and I've invited people from the stage at my church to do stuff with me. I'm like, we're going to lead a Spartan group, and we're going to run Spartans. And years ago, and I was like, Kevin and Justin, you're going to join me. And they were like, what? You know, and so like from the stage, I'm just like, hey, we're going to invite motorcycle group. There's a group of us getting together on Friday nights every other week. And I would just go, I'd see a guy with a motorcycle somewhere and see his cut on. And I'm like, hey, there's a group of us get together, ride every other Friday night. It's about 15 of us. We'd love for you to go ahead and ride with us, and we meet here. We meet at this church parking lot. It's just an easier place to meet, you know. And so, we'll pray before we go because people in Florida are crazy drivers, and then we're gonna ride for about an hour. Then we're gonna talk about life, probably pray a little bit more, and then we're gonna ride home. You know how many guys showed up to that? I ran into true story. So I told you I do private security. I was there one night in a club that we were taking care of. During the season, and I was just making sure our guys were good. And I saw a guy that was there in the club that night, and he comes up to me, gives me this big old hug, and I'm like, hey, I haven't seen this guy in a long time since we had the motorcycle group. And he gives me this big old hug. He's like, Chad, it's so good to see you. And it like registered. I didn't know who he was at first, and then it registered. And I was like, he's one of the guys I randomly saw at the gas station that started to ride with us and rode with us for months. He would just come, and we would pray over him and pray over his bike and pray over his family and all the things that he had going on. And he would ride with us and go up to Doomdog Cafe, and we would have our hot dog. We would pray there, talk about the Bible, and then we'd pray, come on home, and then that was it. But he was there for a season, but he invested. He said, I never forgot about that group, and I tell people about it all the time. So I want to encourage you, whatever you do, running group, same deal. Maybe you're doing financial peace. Maybe you're doing a married couples group. Maybe you're doing just a women's group. My wife does one every other Thursday night, and she's so faithful, and it has been going forever. I feel like that group has been going forever. How long has it been going for?
6 years, maybe?
6 years. Yeah. Every other Thursday night, 4 moms at our house. So it's a wife-led group, and they meet at 8:30 because we all know mom's schedule doesn't end at normal schedule time. And so they do like the dads watch kiddos from 8:30 to 10, and they meet at the house, and they just invest and my wife writes curriculum, and then they study the Bible, and then they study other stuff, and then they watch videos, and they do all that stuff. But whatever it is, whatever you invite, just make sure that you're invited. Be open with your group. Jesus led his earthly ministry and started what we now know as Christianity with the help of 12 people. His people. His neighbors. Jesus invited, being invested. Come follow me, I'll make you fishers of men. You can see things in people. Could you imagine seeing Peter? I picture that first interaction, and I feel like The Chosen did a really good job of that, of depicting what that would be. I feel like I am Peter. Like, I feel like I have a little bit of Peter in me. A little rough around the edges, depending on the day I may or may not lose my, you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of the way it is. But I just feel like there's this sailor, and he's upset because of all this, you know. And Jesus is like, that's my God, right? He invested and invited. He laughed and he loved. Jesus cared for and corrected. I tell people, I've been a small group pastor for years at some really great churches. And it was like, I love it. And I always told leaders or those who hosted groups, If there's not a little friction, you're not leading right. And what I mean by that is iron sharpens iron, right? So when iron sharpens each other, it gets a little warm. Someone comes into your group talking some craziness. I feel like God called me to lead my wife. No, he didn't. No, sure didn't. I'm going to go ahead and have that conversation right here in front of everyone, right? And we're just going to love all people. We're not going to do it in a mean way. We're going to have a conversation, right? I feel like God's going to call me to quit my job, and I'm not really sure what's next, and I don't have anything lined up, and I'm just going to believe for provision. I'm going to maybe ask some people for money. No, you're not going to do that. You're not. I don't know if that's Jesus or poor pizza, but either way, we're not doing that right now. Or at least we're not going to do that without fasting and praying and seeking some counsel, right? And so we're going to have those conversations, and it's okay to have those conversations inside of your groups, right? There have been many times where I, as the host or the lead, I've thought some things, and it's not, my guys have been like, that ain't right. That's not even a good thought. Like, that's not even close to a good thought. You're in church long enough, you have some weird thoughts, right? And it's not always great. I remember I'll call Joe and I'm like, hey, here's what I think I'm doing. Here's what I got going on. I'll call Joe and Joe's like, hey, let's go ahead and pray on that. Like, that's a thought. Yeah, it's a thought, but he's built some equity with us, right? Don't do it on day one, right? Set some ground rules in your groups, right? You got someone new, just reset those ground rules. Go, hey, man, we're going to be open. We're not going to be negative in here, but we're going to, we're going to challenge each other. It's good. It's what good people do. It is iron sharpening iron. It is the biblical aspect of life. It's what Jesus did. He cared for and corrected. By the way, if you just correct in your group and you don't care for, don't leave the group. If you don't have the emotional bandwidth to care for people, don't leave the group, please. You're going to do more damage unintentionally than you would otherwise, right? So just want to help you there with groups, right? Jesus hosted a group that provided the healing many in that group needed. So, for those of you that are thinking, man, I'm going to lead a group, or maybe you're thinking, I want to get involved in a group, or maybe you're now thinking, man, I wasn't going to lead a group, but I feel like I should now. I hope you do. I feel like everyone should lead a group at some point. Get financial peace. Dave Ramsey does all the work. Help people get financially free. Where debt is done, cash is king. Pay off home mortgages. You know what I mean? Like, whatever you choose to do. Lead a book on prayer. I don't really know prayer that much, but you want to get involved. Get some people around you that want to get to know prayer more. I don't really know the Holy Spirit all that much, but I'm interested. Lead a group for some people, because there's probably 5 other people in this room or around you that want to know the Holy Spirit more and are kind of weirded out by it. They just don't know it. It's not weird. It's the third person of the Trinity. It's God's promise and gift to us. It hurts my heart when I know that people don't understand. Whatever it is. Maybe it's a workout group. You're really good at working out. Like, you love running. You wake up thinking about running. I don't wake up thinking about running. And I ran for a long, I don't run now, but barely. But I would run long distances, like 30 some odd miles. And some of you are like, that's nothing. Chill out, it's a lot for me. Right? And I have obstacles in my way, and 10,000 volts to my back. And I'm like, so it was a thing. But if you wake up and you're like, Jesus, running, then you should probably help someone else get to that place, right? And don't start the group like, hey, man, we're gonna go and we're gonna run 5 hours a day. Don't be that guy, right? Just be like, hey, I know there's some people in here. We're all different places. That'd be awesome. Hey, today we're just gonna try to go a mile, right? We're gonna just start. We're gonna start here. We're gonna work our way up. But in the process before it, we're gonna talk about the body and how the importance is that we need to take care of the temple of the Holy Spirit, and we're gonna just go ahead and do this thing. We're just going to try to knock it out and get ourselves in better shape, because the reality is God wants us around for a very long time to do really good things for a really long time. Right? Whatever you do, just make sure. However you lead it, whatever group you get a part of. Because this church is not going to be this size for long. And by the way, if you're wondering, what's a small group? 12 and under. Right? Jesus did a really good job of providing numerical value to us. If you're like, I think 25 is really good. Nope. He's not. That's a small church. It's a church split. Like, we're not doing that, right? And so we're going to get involved. And once our group hit 12, I had somebody else lined up to take on everybody else. And they would go on the other side of the dump because I don't want your group near my dump. But we would just do that because we were called to multiply our groups. It's biblical. What I can tell you is this: my life has been changed because Joe loved the Lord his God with all of his heart, all of his soul, and all of his mind. But he didn't stop there, because he continued on to what Jesus said. He loved his neighbor as himself. Want for somebody else what you want for you. Be the mentor. Be the leader. Be the individual in someone else's life that you wish you to have, or that you do have, or whatever that is. I've done my best to just try to honor Joe and God by being a leader that he was to me. I want to be faithful. I want to be trustworthy. I want to be real. And I hope you want to do the same. Because small groups in this church will be a very strong core to what this place is known for. I wouldn't be in ministry today if it wasn't for it. He saw something in me years, and I say years before anyone else did. This season of groups of good soil, go into them with expectation and excitement, and remember to do those two commandments. Love the Lord your God, all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. And you want for others what you want or have only for yourself. Good soil. Write the question down. Who are my people? Who's my group? Who's my tribe? Who's my neighbor? It's important. It's the second. Let's go ahead and pray. Father, I love you, and I thank you so much for this incredible church. I ask you to bless them as they leave here today and they talk about this message and even think about it in their heart. I pray, Jesus, that you would provide them with leaders that just surround them and pull out great things in them, and that they would be the leader that pulls out others and see great in others, and Father, that they would seek you first in everything that they do, regardless of the type of group that they lead. Father, I pray that they would pray, that they would seek you, that they would love you, that they would talk about your word, they would talk about things that are close to your heart, Jesus, that they would not just be an itemized group that is void of the Spirit of the living God, but Father, they invite you into everything that they are a part of. And Father, I ask you right now that you would bless this next season of groups, that you would bless this church, that you would continue to allow it to thrive and invest and to love on and to care for those that are right here, Jesus, our neighbors, our community. Father, I pray that we would be a people that would just see people the way that you do. Change our hearts for the things that break yours. And Father, I thank you for the season that is ahead. Let it be one of blessing, one of encouragement, one of development, and one that helps others. Maybe there's somebody in this room that so needs a Joe in their life. Pray for them and what's to come. I pray that 23 years later that they would still be connected to somebody in this room. I know that I could call Mike Martin and ask him about what it means to raise two godly children, and he would be able to help me. I know that I could call Joe and talk. I know that if Bart was still around, I could call him and ask him a verse or what it meant, and Bart would be able to tell me. I pray, Father, that you would build those kind of relationships that would be sustained. There would be a foundation of faith that this church would build itself on in Jesus' precious name. Amen? Amen. I love you, Good Soil Church. Thank you so very much.